I am Nellie, 30 years old, and until last week I was just another senior account manager at Palmer and Reed Marketing. For 7 years I built an impeccable reputation handling our top client portfolios. That all changed when Robert, our CEO, stormed into my office demanding, "Hand over all your client files, right now." Little did he know, I had anticipated this moment for weeks. The look on his face when he opened those files made every sleepless night worth it. If you have ever had to stand up to workplace bullies, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know where you are watching from. Trust me, you will want to see how this ends. When I started at Palmer and Reed Marketing as a junior account coordinator, I never imagined I would rise through the ranks so quickly. Fresh out of college with my marketing degree, I was hungry to prove myself in the cutthroat advertising world of Chicago. Through late nights, weekend work, and a genuine passion for creating campaigns that actually worked, I built a reputation as someone who delivered results. By my 3rd year, I was managing accounts. By year 5, I had been promoted to senior account manager, with my own team. The company itself was a mid-sized agency with big ambitions. Our glass and steel office in downtown Chicago screamed success with client awards lining the reception area and industry magazines featuring our work prominently displayed. From the outside, Palmer and Reed looked like the perfect place to build a career. And for a while it was. As senior account manager, I directly handled our 5 most valuable clients: Westfield Properties, a luxury real estate developer; Blue Sky Technologies, an emerging tech firm; Hartman Healthcare Group; Lux Lifestyle Brands; and Northern Trust Financial. Together, these accounts represented nearly 40% of the company revenue. My relationship with these clients went beyond professional. We had built genuine trust. They came to me with problems, celebrated wins together, and knew I would fight for their best interests. The key players at Palmer and Reed formed a complex web of alliances and rivalries. At the top sat Robert Caldwell, our CEO, a 50-something man with salt and pepper hair, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Robert had a reputation for being brilliant but ruthless. He had built the company from a 3-person operation to a powerhouse, with over 200 employees. His public persona was charming and charismatic, but those who worked closely with him knew his darker side, taking credit for others' ideas, pitting employees against each other, and discarding people once they were no longer useful. Diana Williams served as my mentor since day one. As Senior Vice President of Client Relations, she recognized my potential early and took me under her wing. In her late 50s, with a no-nonsense attitude and impeccable style, Diana was one of the few people who could stand up to Robert without consequences. She had been with the company almost from the beginning and had an equity stake that gave her certain protections. Diana taught me the unwritten rules of agency life and how to navigate the political landscape. Then there was Trevor Blackwell, the Chief Operating Officer and Robert's right-hand man. Trevor was younger than Robert, maybe early 40s, with a perfectly tailored wardrobe and a British accent he sometimes exaggerated for effect. He had joined the company 3 years ago, after our previous COO retired, and quickly aligned himself with Robert's vision and methods. Trevor always seemed to appear in doorways or around corners whenever sensitive conversations were happening. Lately, I had noticed him watching me with increasing interest. My assistant, Amber Rodriguez, had been with me for just over a year. 24 and ambitious, she reminded me of myself when I started, eager to learn, detail-oriented and trustworthy. Amber managed my calendar, prepared client presentations, and kept everything running smoothly so I could focus on strategy and client relationships. The culture at Palmer and Reed had always been competitive, but in recent months something had shifted. Account executives would discover their clients suddenly reassigned to other teams without explanation. People who questioned decisions disappeared from the company roster without announcement. The collaborative atmosphere that had once made the agency special was being replaced by something more cutthroat. I first sensed trouble when Jennifer from accounting mentioned casually that she had been asked to prepare profitability reports for my specific accounts. When I asked who requested them, she became uncomfortable and changed the subject. Then came the strategic realignment meeting, where my department was the only one not invited. Pieces started falling into place when Diana pulled me aside after a client call. "Be careful with the Westfield account," she whispered. "Robert has been asking a lot of questions about your relationship with them." "What kind of questions?" I asked. "The kind that suggest he thinks their loyalty is to Palmer and Reed, not to you personally," Diana said, giving me a meaningful look. That was when I realized Robert wasn't just making business decisions, he was making a play for my clients. In his mind, my relationships with these valuable accounts posed a threat. If I left, they might follow. The solution: push me out, but secure the clients first. Classic Robert. The first concrete sign of trouble came in the form of an email from Trevor. The message itself seemed innocent enough: a request for detailed contact information for all key decision-makers at my client companies for the updated company directory. What struck me as odd was that this information already existed in our CRM system, which Trevor had full access to. Why ask me to compile it separately? I provided the information, but added a note to each client in our system that any contact should go through me first. Standard protocol for account managers. The very next day, those notes had been removed. When I questioned our IT department, they informed me that Trevor had requested the change. Around this time, the meeting exclusions became more obvious. Twice in 1 week, I discovered that strategy sessions for Westfield properties had been held without me, despite my role as their primary contact. When I confronted my colleague Jackson about it, he looked uncomfortable. "I assumed you were busy," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Trevor said you had approved him taking point on their upcoming campaign." I had approved no such thing. The following Tuesday, I was working late finalizing a presentation for Blue Sky Technologies when I overheard voices from the conference room down the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and Robert's distinctive voice carried clearly. "The Westfield account is too valuable to risk," he was saying. "Their contract renewal is coming up in 3 months. I want the transition completed well before then so they don't associate any changes with Nellie's departure." "And if she doesn't cooperate with the restructuring?" Trevor asked. "Everyone has a price," Robert replied. "We'll offer a generous severance. If that doesn't work, we have other options. The important thing is securing those client relationships first." My heart pounded as I quietly retreated to my office. They were planning to push me out after stealing my clients. The realization felt like a physical blow, but it also clarified things. This wasn't paranoia. It was corporate strategy. The next morning, Jessica from the creative team caught me in the break room. We had worked together on numerous campaigns and developed a friendly relationship outside of work. "I need to tell you something," she said, voice low. "Trevor asked me to send him all the creative briefs for your accounts directly from now on. He said it was to streamline the approval process, but it feels off." I thanked her for the heads up. My suspicions further confirmed. Later that week, the company announced a major new direction at an all-hands meeting. Robert stood at the front of the room, Trevor by his side, as he unveiled plans for a new integrated client services division that would revolutionize our approach to key accounts. "This new structure will allow us to serve our top clients more efficiently," Robert explained, his eyes briefly meeting mine across the room. "Trevor will head this division, bringing together our best resources under one roof." The subtext was clear: my department would be absorbed, my role eliminated, and my clients transferred to Trevor's control. The timeline suggested they would do this, gradually extracting client relationships and institutional knowledge before showing me the door. That afternoon, I discovered something that confirmed my worst fears. Amber came to me visibly upset. "I need to tell you something," she said, closing my office door. "Trevor asked me to forward him all emails between you and the Westfield team. He said you requested this as part of a new mentoring program, but I know you would have told me about something like that." "What did you tell him?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, despite my racing heart. "That I'd need to confirm with you first," she replied. He seemed annoyed but didn't push it. I thanked Amber for her loyalty and asked her to document the request. It was clear now that Robert and Trevor were systematically working to undermine me, collecting information inserting themselves into my client relationships and preparing to push me out once they had secured what they needed. The final confirmation came when a junior copywriter accidentally copied me on a brief for a new Westfield campaign, one I knew nothing about. The document listed Trevor as the account lead and made no mention of me or my team. They weren't even waiting for my departure to begin the transition. The betrayal stung deeply. I had given 7 years to this company, built these client relationships from scratch, and delivered consistent growth. Now I was being treated as disposable, a mere obstacle between Robert and what he wanted. But beneath the hurt, something else was building determination. If Robert thought I would simply step aside, he had severely underestimated me. The morning after discovering the Westfield brief, I texted Diana coffee off-site. Important. 20 minutes later, we sat in a quiet corner of a cafe 3 blocks from the office. They're making their move, I said without preamble, sliding my phone across the table to show her the brief. Diana examined it, her expression grim. I was afraid of this. Robert approached the board last month about a strategic reorganization of the client services department. He presented it as an efficiency measure, but I suspected there was more to it. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. I was gathering information, she said. Accusations without proof would just put a target on both our backs. But yes, they're planning to absorb your clients into Trevor's new division and ease you out. What triggered this? My numbers are strong. Client satisfaction is at record levels. Diana's eyes softened. That's exactly the problem, Nellie. You're too good. Those clients are loyal to you, not the company. Robert sees that as a liability. The realization hit hard. My success had made me a threat. So what do? I asked. That depends, Diana said carefully. What do you want, to stay and fight, or to make a clean break? I considered this. The company culture had been deteriorating for months. Even if I managed to keep my position, would I want to stay in such a toxic environment? On the other hand, I had built something valuable here, and the thought of Robert and Trevor profiting from my hard work made my blood boil. I want options, I finally said, and I don't want them to get away with this. Diana nodded approvingly. Then we need to prepare, carefully. Over the next hour, we outlined a strategy. The key was documentation, proving my contribution to these accounts, establishing my personal relationship with the clients, and capturing any unethical behavior in the transition process. Diana advised me to consult a lawyer about the non-compete clause in my contract and potential intellectual property issues with campaign concepts I had developed. Back at the office, I began methodical preparation while maintaining a facade of business as usual. Each evening, after most employees had left, I stayed behind to organize and duplicate essential records. I created a detailed log of all my client interactions, campaign successes, and revenue generated. I compiled emails showing direct praise from clients and acknowledgement of my personal contribution. I was particularly careful about contracts. While reviewing them, I discovered that 3 of my 5 major clients had specified me by name in their agreements with Palmer and Reed. The contracts included clauses requiring notification if their account manager changed, a detail Robert had likely overlooked. My friend Stephanie, a corporate attorney, agreed to meet me for dinner to discuss my situation. Over pasta at a restaurant, far from any potential workplace observers, she reviewed my contract and the evidence I had gathered. Your non-compete is actually quite narrow, she said, sounding surprised. It prevents you from taking clients to a competitor for 12 months, but has an interesting exception for clients who independently terminate their relationship with Palmer and Reed before seeking services elsewhere. Meaning if they fire the agency first, then hire you later, either independently or at a new company after a reasonable period, you're in the clear. This was valuable information. I wasn't planning to poach clients, but knowing the exact terms of my restrictions was important. What about the campaign concepts and strategies I've developed? I asked. That's trickier, Stephanie admitted. Work product generally belongs to the employer, but there's a gray area around concepts and approaches you developed based on your personal expertise. Document everything thoroughly, particularly noting your specific intellectual contributions separate from company resources. Armed with this advice, I created a comprehensive system of backup files and evidence. I stored copies in multiple locations, encrypted cloud storage, a password-protected external drive kept at home, and select documents with Stephanie for safekeeping. I was meticulous about using only my personal devices outside of work hours for this documentation to avoid any claim I had misused company resources. Meanwhile, I continued normal operations at work, careful not to show any signs of my knowledge or preparations. I attended meetings with polite professionalism, delivered on all client expectations, and even mentored junior team members as usual. The only change was invisible to others. I began keeping detailed notes of every interaction with Robert, Trevor, and other executives. When Trevor casually stopped by to ask about Westfield's upcoming contract renewal, I provided basic information while omitting key details about my personal discussions with their CEO. When Robert suddenly took interest in attending a Blue Sky client dinner that he would normally have skipped, I welcomed his presence while documenting how he attempted to establish direct contact with their marketing director. I also quietly reached out to my network outside the company, reconnecting with former colleagues and industry contacts. Not to job hunt, that would come later if necessary, but to strengthen my professional community independent of Palmer and Reed. These connections would be valuable regardless of how the situation resolved. Throughout this preparation phase, I experienced a roller coaster of emotions: anger at the betrayal, anxiety about my future, doubt about whether I was overreacting. The stress manifested physically: sleepless nights, tension, headaches, a constant knot in my stomach. But beneath all that was a growing sense of empowerment. I was not a passive victim in this scenario. I was taking control, preparing for whatever came next. Diana provided crucial moral support during this time, checking in regularly and offering strategic advice. "Robert is getting impatient," she warned me one afternoon. "He asked about your client files in the executive meeting yesterday. Said something about wanting to review the account structures." "Let him ask," I replied with more confidence than I felt. "Everything is documented and in order." And it was. By the time Robert made his move, I had prepared for every scenario I could imagine. What I couldn't have predicted was just how dramatically things would unfold. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was reviewing quarterly metrics with Amber when my office door flew open without warning. Robert stood in the doorway, his 6'2" frame blocking the light from the hallway. His normally perfectly coiffed hair looked slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. Behind him, Trevor hovered with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nellie," Robert said, his voice carrying across the office floor, "I need all your client files, every contract, every email, every contact, right now." The entire office went silent. Heads popped up from cubicles like prairie dogs, everyone sensing the dramatic confrontation unfolding. Amber froze beside me, her eyes wide with alarm. "Good morning, Robert," I replied calmly, though my heart was racing. "May I ask what this is regarding?" His face flushed slightly at my composure. He had clearly expected panic or resistance. "The board has approved our department restructuring effective immediately. Trevor will be taking over your accounts as part of the new Integrated Services Division. I need all files transferred to him by end of day." His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. "I see," I said, noticing how several colleagues were now openly watching. "Amber, would you mind giving us the room, and perhaps closing the door?" She nodded, slipping past Robert and Trevor with a concerned glance back at me. Once the door closed, Robert's professional veneer slipped further. "Let's not play games, Nellie," he said, moving closer to my desk. "We both know this transition has been coming. The company needs to secure these client relationships at the institutional level." Trevor leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "It's really in everyone's best interest," he added, with fake sincerity. "The board feels these accounts have become too dependent on individual relationships rather than agency capabilities." I noticed he carefully avoided saying your relationships explicitly, but the implication was clear. So I'm being let go? I asked directly. Robert's expression shifted to something resembling sympathy, though it didn't reach his eyes. We're eliminating your current position, yes, but we'd like to offer you a transitional role to ensure a smooth handover, 6 months generous compensation. After that, we can discuss other opportunities within the company. Translation. We want to extract everything you know. Have you personally introduced Trevor to your clients to transfer their trust, then show you the door once you're no longer useful. I see, I said again, maintaining my calm. And you need all my files right now. Yes, Robert said firmly. Complete transfer, physical and digital. Trevor has already been granted access to your company email and drive folders. That explained the notification I'd received from IT this morning. A routine system update requiring temporary access changes. They weren't even subtle anymore. Of course, I said, rising from my desk. Let me get everything organized for you. My response clearly surprised them. Robert blinked momentarily, thrown off balance by my cooperation. He had come prepared for resistance, perhaps even hoping for an emotional outburst that would justify immediate termination. That's very professional of you, he said cautiously. I smiled politely and moved to my filing cabinet. I've always tried to put the company's interests first, Robert. You know that. For the next 20 minutes, I methodically gathered files from my cabinet, occasionally explaining the organization system as if this were a normal handover. Through my office window, I could see curious colleagues trying to appear busy while watching the drama unfold. Trevor kept checking his phone impatiently. These are the current contracts, I explained, placing a stack of folders on my desk. And these contain the campaign performance metrics from the last 3 quarters. Another stack. Client contact information and meeting notes. A third stack. And these are the strategy documents and creative briefs for all ongoing and planned campaigns. A fourth. Robert's impatience was growing visibly. Just put it all in these boxes, he said, gesturing to the cardboard containers Trevor had brought along. We'll sort through it later. As you wish, I replied carefully, placing the files in the boxes. Would you like me to walk you through the digital files as well? There's quite an extensive organization system. That won't be necessary, Trevor cut in. We have IT transferring everything to me as we speak. I nodded, continuing to organize the physical files. Almost done then. Just need to include the client communication logs and proprietary strategy documents. I retrieved a final set of folders from my cabinet, these ones different from the others with distinctive blue covers. I placed them on top of the boxes and stepped back. That should be everything, I said. Would you like me to help carry these to your office? We've got it, Robert said already, reaching for the boxes. He seemed eager to end this interaction, perhaps uncomfortable with my unexpected cooperation. I watched, as they gathered the boxes, Trevor struggling slightly with the weight of his. As they reached the door, I spoke one last time. Robert, you might want to review the blue folders first, I said casually. They contain information particularly relevant to the transition. He nodded distractedly and continued out the door. Through my office window, I watched them cross the office floor colleagues, pretending not to stare as they passed. Only when they disappeared into the elevator did I allow myself to sit down, my hands finally betraying a slight tremor. Amber slipped back into my office, closing the door behind her. Are you okay? She asked. What happened? Just a reorganization, I said with a calmness I didn't entirely feel. But I think Robert might be about to have a very interesting morning. In Robert's corner office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, the boxes of my client files sat on his massive glass desk. Trevor stood nearby, already talking about how he would revitalize the client relationships and bring fresh perspective to the accounts. Robert was only half listening as he flipped open the first of the blue folders I had specifically directed his attention to. I wasn't in the room, of course, but Diana filled me in later on what happened next. The first document in the folder was a detailed analysis of the Westfield Properties account. Not just performance metrics, but a comprehensive breakdown of my personal contribution to their 40% revenue increase over the past 2 years. It included emails from Westfield's CEO, Thomas Bradford, specifically praising my work and stating how crucial I was to their continued partnership. Robert's expression shifted as he continued reading. The next document was a printed copy of Westfield's contract with Palmer and Reed with a yellow highlight over Clause 18.3. Palmer and Reed agrees that Nellie Watson shall serve as primary account manager for all services provided under this agreement. Any change to this arrangement requires 30 days written notice and approval from Westfield Properties. Similar clauses appeared in the contracts for Blue Sky Technologies and Hartman Healthcare Group. Trevor, noticing Robert's changing expression, looked over his shoulder at the documents. "Is there a problem?" Robert didn't respond, instead opening the next blue folder. This one contained a chronological record of every instance over the past 3 months where Trevor or other executives had attempted to circumvent me in client communications. Each incident was meticulously documented, with dates, times, and copies of relevant emails. The third folder held something even more damaging: evidence of billing irregularities I had discovered while reviewing client invoices. Several clients had been charged for services never rendered or billed at rates higher than contractually agreed upon. I had compiled a complete audit trail showing who had authorized these changes, primarily Trevor, with Robert's sign-off. "What the hell is this?" Trevor demanded, his face flushing with anger, as he recognized his own signature on several of the questionable authorizations. But Robert wasn't listening. He had opened the final folder, which contained a formal letter from me to the board of directors. The letter detailed the systematic attempt to undermine my position, the unethical billing practices, and the potential breach of client contracts. It concluded with a list of all 5 major clients and their probable response to my removal as account manager, including statements from client contacts indicating they would reconsider their relationship with Palmer and Reed if I were no longer involved. Attached to the letter was a legal opinion from a prominent industry attorney. Stephanie had connected me with her colleague regarding the potential liability the company faced for breach of contract and fraudulent billing practices. "This is blackmail," Trevor sputtered, his British accent more pronounced in his agitation. Robert finally looked up, his face ashen. "No," he said quietly. "This is someone who came prepared." He closed the folder slowly. "Where are the copies?" "What?" "She wouldn't have given us the only copies," Robert said, running a hand through his hair. "She's smarter than that." Indeed I was. Everything in those blue folders existed in triplicate, one set now in Robert's possession, one secured with Stephanie, and one in encrypted cloud storage that Diana had access to as well. According to Diana, Robert sat silently for nearly 5 minutes, staring at the folders. Trevor paced the office, alternating between angry outbursts about my disloyalty and nervous questions about what this meant for him personally. Finally, Robert reached for his phone and called his assistant. "Cancel my meetings for the rest of the day," he instructed, "and get Patricia from the board on the line." After a pause, "Yes, it's urgent." Trevor stopped pacing. "You're calling the board. Why not just fire her and be done with it?" Robert gave him a look that silenced him instantly. "Because, Trevor, if we fire her, these documents go straight to the board anyway, and possibly to our clients and the authorities as well. We need to handle this carefully." What Robert didn't know was that I had already sent confidential messages to each board member, alerting them to the situation and the evidence I had compiled, without sharing the actual documents yet. It was insurance, making sure that if Robert tried to bury this, the board would already be primed to ask questions. Back in my office, I waited. The confrontation had happened around 10 in the morning. By noon, the atmosphere in the office was thick with tension and whispered conversations. Everyone had seen Robert and Trevor take my files, but no one knew exactly what was happening. At 1 o'clock, Robert's assistant Jessica approached my desk. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. "Nellie, Robert would like to see you in the conference room," she said. Now I asked, though I had been expecting this summons. "Yes, right away. Patricia Henderson from the board is there as well." That was interesting. Patricia was the board chairperson, a shrewd businesswoman who had invested in Palmer and Reed early on. I had met her only twice at company events. I gathered a notepad and pen more for something to do with my hands than any expectation of taking notes, and followed Jessica to the main conference room. Inside, Robert sat at the head of the table, looking considerably less confident than he had this morning. Patricia sat to his right, elegant, in a navy suit, her silver hair cut in a precise bob. Trevor was noticeably absent. "Nellie, thank you for joining us," Patricia said, gesturing to a chair. "We have some matters to discuss." I sat down, maintaining my professional composure despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Of course." Robert cleared his throat. "In light of some information that has come to my attention, we're reconsidering the departmental reorganization announced this morning." "I see," I said, waiting for more. Patricia took over. "Nellie, Robert has shared with me some concerning documentation from your files. I'd like to hear directly from you about these issues, particularly the billing irregularities and the client contract clauses." For the next hour, I walked them through everything I had discovered and documented. Patricia asked pointed questions, particularly about the timing of events and how I had become aware of the situation. Robert remained largely silent occasionally, attempting to frame certain decisions in a more favorable light, but Patricia shut down these efforts with a raised hand or direct question that exposed the flimsy justification. When I finished, Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for this thorough explanation. The board takes these matters very seriously." She turned to Robert. "I think we need to continue this discussion privately. Nellie, would you excuse us?" I stood to leave. But before I reached the door, Patricia added, "We'll need you to remain available. Perhaps it would be best if you worked from home for the remainder of the day. We'll be in touch tomorrow at the latest." I nodded and left, feeling dozens of eyes on me as I gathered my personal items from my office. Amber gave me a questioning look. "Administrative leave," I told her quietly. "I'll keep you posted." As I left the building, I felt strangely calm. The confrontation I had been dreading for weeks had finally happened, and while the outcome remained uncertain, I had done everything possible to protect myself and expose the unethical behavior. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same preparation and resolve. The drive home from the office that afternoon felt surreal. The familiar streets of Chicago passed by in a blur, as my mind raced with questions and possibilities. What was happening in the board meeting now? Would Robert find a way to spin the situation? Would my evidence be enough? Once home, I kicked off my heels and poured myself a glass of wine, even though it was barely 3 in the afternoon. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving me physically and emotionally drained. I sank onto my couch, finally allowing myself to process the morning's events. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Meeting still going. Robert, looks like hell. We'll call you after." I smiled despite my exhaustion. Diana had been my rock through this entire ordeal, risking her own position to help me navigate the treacherous corporate waters. I owed her more than I could express. Around 5, my phone rang. Diana, as promised. "You should have seen it," she said without preamble. Patricia absolutely eviscerated Robert. Asked him point blank if he had authorized the billing discrepancies. When he tried to blame accounting procedures, she pulled out your documentation showing his signature on the authorizations. "What about Trevor?" I asked. "Threw him completely under the bus," Diana replied with grim satisfaction. Claimed Trevor had assured him everything was above board. Patricia wasn't buying it, but it was clear Trevor will be taking the biggest fall here. And the restructuring plan. Officially on hold pending board review. Patricia has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. It was something, at least. Not a clear victory, but the first sign that my preparations had made an impact. After thanking Diana for the update, I tried to relax for the evening, but sleep proved elusive. I kept replaying the confrontation in my mind, second-guessing my responses, wondering if I could have handled things differently. Around 9, my phone rang again. Unknown number. "Hello. Nellie. It's Thomas Bradford from Westfield. The CEO of my largest client was calling me directly. My pulse quickened. Thomas, hello. What can I do for you? I just got off a very strange call with Trevor Blackwell, he said, sounding confused. He introduced himself as our new account lead at Palmer and Reed. Mentioned something about a reorganization. Is there something I should know? So, Trevor was already making moves, trying to establish relationships with my clients before anything was officially decided. Bold, but not surprising. There are some organizational changes being considered, I said carefully, but nothing has been finalized. I apologize for any confusion. Well, I made it clear to Mr. Blackwell that our contract specifies you as our account manager, Thomas said firmly. I also told him we'd be reviewing our options if that arrangement changes. I value our working relationship, Nellie. The results you've delivered speak for themselves. Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate your support more than I can say. Similar calls came in from 2 other clients that evening. Word was spreading fast. By morning, all 5 of my major clients had reached out expressing concern about the possible changes and affirming their preference to continue working with me. I documented each call meticulously. This was exactly the client reaction I had predicted in my letter to the board. Confirmation that these relationships were indeed personal, not merely institutional. After another largely sleepless night, I awoke to an email from Patricia's assistant, Miss Henderson. Request your presence at a meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please confirm availability. I confirmed immediately, then spent the day in a strange limbo. I used the time to update my resume and portfolio just in case, and consulted again with Stephanie about my legal position. She advised me to prepare for all possibilities, from being offered a better position at Palmer and Reed to being terminated and needing to fight for severance. Based on what you've told me, they'd be fools to let you go, she said. But corporate politics don't always follow logical paths. Around 6 that evening, approximately 30 hours after the initial confrontation, my phone rang again. Patricia Henderson. Nellie, she said, her tone giving away nothing. I'm calling personally because I wanted to speak with you before tomorrow's meeting. I appreciate that, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The board met today, she continued. We reviewed the documentation you provided, as well as additional information that came to light during our discussions with Robert and Trevor. There was a brief pause during which I held my breath. What you uncovered is deeply troubling, Patricia said finally. The billing irregularities alone represent a significant ethical breach. The attempted circumvention of client contracts puts the company at serious legal risk. I understand, I said, unsure where this was heading. Robert has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation, Patricia continued. Trevor submitted his resignation this afternoon, effective immediately. I sat down hard on my couch, the implications sinking in. Robert, the CEO, the founder, the seemingly untouchable power center of Palmer and Reed, had been suspended. Trevor was already gone. I'd like to discuss your role in all this more thoroughly tomorrow, Patricia said. But I wanted you to know these developments before you came in. The board recognizes the significance of your actions in bringing these issues to light. Thank you for telling me, I managed to say. Get some rest, Nellie. We have much to discuss tomorrow. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Then, for the first time since this ordeal began, I allowed myself to cry. From relief, from vindication, from the release of weeks of built-up tension and fear. The outcome was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. Robert's plan had backfired spectacularly. At exactly the 36-hour mark from when Robert had first demanded my files, I received one more call from Diana. It's over, she said simply. Robert is out, Trevor is gone, and Patricia wants to offer you a new position. What position? I asked, hardly daring to hope. Come in tomorrow and find out, Diana replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. But Nellie, bring your negotiating skills. This is your moment. The next morning I dressed with particular care, a A charcoal suit that projected confidence without ostentation, subtle jewelry hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. As I rode the elevator up to Palmer and Reed's offices, I mentally prepared for all scenarios. Despite the encouraging news from Patricia and Diana, years in corporate America had taught me to remain cautious until everything was officially resolved. Walking through the office was surreal. Colleagues stared openly, some offering tentative smiles, others quickly averting their gaze. The power dynamics had shifted dramatically in just 2 days, and no one was quite sure where they stood, including me. Patricia's assistant led me to the main boardroom rather than Patricia's office, which I took as a significant sign. Inside, Patricia sat at the head of the table with Diana and 3 other board members present. No sign of Robert or Trevor, of course. "Nellie, thank you for joining us," Patricia began after I was seated. "Before we discuss next steps, I want to acknowledge the courage it took to document and present the issues you uncovered. Many would have simply resigned or allowed the situation to continue." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "As I mentioned yesterday, Robert has been placed on indefinite leave while we conduct a full investigation. The preliminary findings support everything you documented and suggest the issues may be even more widespread." One of the other board members, Gerald Thompson, leaned forward. "The client contracts were particularly concerning. The fact that 3 major accounts specifically named you as their representative creates significant risk for the company if those relationships are damaged. Which brings us to why we asked you here today," Patricia continued. "The board has unanimously decided to offer you a new position at Palmer and Reed, Executive Vice President of Client Relations." I blinked in surprise. This was several levels above my current role, effectively making me second, only to whoever would replace Robert. "We believe your client relationship skills and ethical approach to business are exactly what the company needs right now," Patricia explained. "You would oversee all major client accounts and have direct input on company policy regarding client management and billing practices." The offer was stunning, a dramatic promotion with presumably significant compensation increases and real power to change the toxic culture that had developed under Robert's leadership. But something held me back from immediate acceptance. The events of the past weeks had fundamentally changed how I viewed Palmer and Reed. Could I really continue to work for a company where such unethical behavior had been allowed to flourish? Would others who had enabled Robert and Trevor still remain in positions of influence? "I'm honored by the offer," I said carefully. "Before I respond, I'd like to understand more about the vision for Palmer and Reed moving forward. Specifically, what structural changes are being considered to prevent similar issues in the future?" Patricia looked impressed by the question. For the next hour, we engaged in a detailed discussion about governance oversight and cultural transformation. I proposed several specific changes, including a new ethics committee with real authority, transparent client billing reviews, and protection for employees who report misconduct. To my surprise, the board was receptive to all of these suggestions. They recognized that the company's reputation was at stake and that fundamental change was necessary. "These are exactly the kinds of reforms we need," Patricia said approvingly, "which reinforces why we want you in this leadership role. You've demonstrated not just skill in client relationships, but a commitment to ethical business practices that Palmer and Reed must embrace going forward." By the end of the meeting, I had provisionally accepted the position pending final negotiation of terms. As we concluded, Diana gave me a subtle thumbs up across the table. Walking back through the office afterward felt different. I held my head higher, met the curious gazes of colleagues directly. Word of my promotion spread quickly, and by afternoon my email was flooded with congratulations and meeting requests. The following week was a whirlwind of transition. I moved into a larger office near the executive suite. My first official act was to call a department-wide meeting to address the changes transparently and assuage fears about further restructuring. "This company is entering a new chapter," I told the assembled team. "One founded on mutual respect, ethical practices, and recognition of each person's contribution. The changes ahead will strengthen us, not divide us." Rebuilding trust with my team and clients became my primary focus. I scheduled individual meetings with each client to personally assure them of the company's commitment to ethical practices and service excellence. Their relief was palpable, and several expressed that they had been considering leaving until they heard I would be leading client relations. Within the company, the healing process was more complex. Some employees had been complicit in Robert and Trevor's schemes. Others had stood by silently out of fear. Creating a culture where people felt safe to speak up would take time and consistent demonstration of new values. I made it a point to recognize and promote those who had shown integrity during the difficult period, including Amber, who became a junior account manager. Jessica, from Creative, who had warned me about Trevor's maneuvers, took on greater responsibility, leading client creative presentations. As for Robert and Trevor, their professional downfall was swift and public. The industry trade publications ran features on the leadership change at Palmer and Reed, with thinly veiled references to ethical concerns that had prompted the board's action. Trevor quickly left Chicago altogether, taking a position with a smaller agency on the West Coast. Robert fought harder, threatening legal action against the board, but ultimately accepted a severance package in exchange for his resignation and silence. 3 months into my new role, Patricia invited me to lunch to discuss progress. "The transformation you're leading has exceeded our expectations," she said. "Client retention is at 98%, and we've actually signed 2 new major accounts based on our renewed reputation for ethical management." "It's the team," I said. "They were always capable of this level of performance. They just needed the right environment to thrive in." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "The board was discussing this morning. What would have happened if you hadn't documented everything so thoroughly? If Robert had succeeded in pushing you out?" I considered this. "The truth eventually comes out," I said. "But it might have taken years with a lot of damage done in the meantime." Documentation wasn't just protection for me. It was protection for the company itself, even if Robert couldn't see that. As I reflect on this experience now, the lessons seem both simple and profound. Document everything, not out of paranoia, but as a normal professional practice. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Build authentic relationships that transcend corporate structures. And perhaps most importantly, stand firm in your personal ethics, even when doing so is difficult or risky. The business world can be ruthless, but integrity remains a powerful force. Sometimes it's the quiet preparation, the meticulous documentation, the careful building of alliances, the unwavering commitment to doing things right, that ultimately speaks the loudest. If you've ever faced a similar workplace challenge or had to stand up against unethical behavior, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. What documentation or preparation saved you in a difficult situation? How did you maintain your integrity when tested? Remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves professionally. Thank you for joining me on this journey from confrontation to vindication. Remember, your greatest power often lies in being thoroughly prepared for whatever comes your way.